The writing may be beginning to be on the wall for Brandon Marsh in Philadelphia. The scrappy fan favorite outfielder has failed to carve out a consistent role for himself, with his struggles at the plate being put on full display this season. Rob Thomson had some interesting thoughts on the outlook for Marsh specifically, as he has been sent down to AAA on an alleged rehab assignment that has more to do with getting himself back in order. I want to discuss exactly what was said by Rob Thomson, why do you think these are long-term concerns, and why I think the Brandon Marsh experience may be coming to an end here in Philadelphia soon. So let's dive right into things here. I do want to start off with this headline here. Written in shout out to Sportcasting here, that Philly set ultimatum for struggling outfielder after the Mets sweep. So obviously that was sort of the low point of Brandon Marsh, and the exact quote that we got here is, quote, "We like Brandon Marsh a lot, but competition is what makes the world go round," Phillies president Dave Dombrowski said after the team moved him to AAA for a reset following a rough start to the season, per the Philadelphia Inquirer Scott Lauber. "I know Marsh is better than this, but he's got to go and do it. We hope he gets a reset because we know he's a good hitter." After joining the Phillies via trade in 2022, Marsh has started a majority of the Phillies game in the outfield, but in a .095 batting average and a hamstring injury to start the season might have been the final straw in his competition to stay in the batting order. This is a tough break for Brandon Marsh. This is a guy that I think all of us have enjoyed here in Philadelphia, that he is a guy who gets it from a personality perspective, a guy who does want it, who plays the game in a way that we want our Phillies players to play, that it is competitive. He does care for his teammates. He's one of the guys that does all the little things right, but that doesn't make up for the deficiencies at the top here. Now, to lay out his stats on the season with Marsh overall, he does have 1 home run, he does have 5 RBIs, a .220 on base percentage, which is rough there. 7 walks and 4 hits in 42 at bats here, 16 strikeouts, and that is the biggest point with Marsh. It is the strikeout rate, a slugging percentage of .167%. That is just not good enough from a major league standard. And for Marsh specifically, I do have some sympathy because he's not the biggest problem with this Phillies team whatsoever. That to cut to the chase with that, I don't want to scapegoat this guy for all the issues that have gone down his team. And to be clear about exactly what I mean by that, that when looking at the Phillies team as a whole, their stats with the bases loaded this season. They've had 31 plate appearances, 26 at-bats, hitting splits of 154, 258, and 308. 1 home run, 16 RBIs. Not good enough whatsoever. They're 1-5 hitters. During that Mets series, they went 9 for 61, a 147 batting average at the plate. That is not good enough. And for this Phillies team, how are you going to grade this season does depend on those top dollar guys. It should not be based on how Brandon Marsh is contributing this season. It has to be about Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Trey Turner, man. Can we take it up another notch? Because I am not seeing it from Trey, and we are too far in this process to just going through the same thing. The errors in the field popping back up. He's not a good defensive shortstop. I'm maddened by the Trey Turner experience. These are all things that are bigger inflection points and bigger frustration points than Brandon Marsh specifically. Now, with that being said, obviously every spot in the field matters. Every spot in the order matters. And I do think that the days of Brandon Marsh may be coming to an end. To dive into the stats specifically here, we know when Brandon Marsh came to Philadelphia, the perception of him or the reputation of him was a little bit different than we got from the actuality. That I still remember when we made the trade, sending Logan O'Hoppe, the catcher, who, by the way, is playing very well at the major league level. I will point that out. I don't have any problem with the decision to trade O'Hoppe there. He was landlocked by JT Realmuto, and there does seem to be some belief in not just Rafael Marchand, but some guys a little bit deeper down in the minors that are working their way up at a pretty rapid rate there. We know the catcher was in a position of need, and I understand cashing out on a high-level prospect for a bigger position of need for this Phillies team. The issue was not the trade in itself. The issue was the player that was returned. Now, when Marsh came here, the perception was he's a glove guy, that the hit tool was getting there. When he got to Philadelphia, the hit tool was far above average. It was a little bit worse in the field. And by the way, that has shown face this year. The play that he injured his hamstring on was one of the least athletic plays I've ever seen a professional athlete do. That it was basically kind of a pop fly dropped in front of him in the outfield. He tried to come up on a gun and basically just tripped all over himself. And then obviously he got hurt as a result here. But the point being here that I think our perception was a little bit different than the actuality. And I kind of think we got a little bit of false hope due to that opening stretch. To take a look at his stats overall, and this is what I mean for the first 2 seasons here. So in 2022 was when that trade was made for Brandon Marsh. In that second half of the season, he had 138 plate appearances, 132 at-bats with this Phillies team, had 38 hits, 9 doubles, 2 triples, 3 home runs, 15 RBIs, and the strikeouts, he had 41 there. He had hitting splits of 288, 319, of 455, also an OPS of 773. Pretty solid numbers, above expectation there. And he did carry that over to 2023 there, that when he had a full season, posted a 3.5 WAR last year, or in 2023 there. Across his 133 games. He had 472 plate appearances, 404 at-bats, 112 hits, had 25 doubles, 6 triples, 12 home runs, 60 RBIs. Really solid numbers here. That when looking at this 2023, I thought he was on the proper arc. That we may be talking about Brandon Marsh far exceeding the expectations of the trade. And to take a look at the whole hitting splits on the season, a 277 batting average, a 372 OBP, a 458 slugging, and an 829 OPS. Really solid numbers for a guy like, if you're getting that from your left fielder or your center fielder, depending on where he's playing, you're pretty okay with that based on the expectations for this Phillies team. But then the drop-off happened last year. A 3.1 WAR, which is still I'm okay with there. 476 plate appearances, 418 at-bats, 55 runs, 104 hits, 17 doubles, 3 triples, 16 home runs, so a little bit of a pop in the power. He did have 60 RBIs, the exact same here, but it is the strikeout rate that we're really getting to concerns. 154 strikeouts in 418 plate appearances is a ton there. And to dive into the hitting splits, 249, 328, and 419. The OPS drops down to 747, regressing in just about each of those categories here, and then being put on full display this season. A negative 0.8 WAR. He's had 51 plate appearances, 42 at-bats, just 4 total hits in those opportunities, and 16 strikeouts. And the Brandon Marsh concern as a whole, the biggest problem, it is completely the strikeouts. That even when he goes through his hot streaks, the hits are there. You see it. But the strikeouts are still evident. And to dive out a stat on that exactly, shout out to Bob Wankel here for tweeting this, that after his 4th inning strikeout, this being back on April 9th, Brandon Marsh is now 47 for 221, a 213 batting average, with 81 strikeouts and 24 walks since the 2024 All-Star break. So in the past 221 at-bats, he did have a handful more after this, so a little bit diluted there. 81 strikeouts. His strikeout rate sitting between roughly around like the 1/3 category, him striking about 1/3 of every time he gets up to the plate. You really can't have that. And again, this is a little bit like unfair to Marsh because it wouldn't stand out as much if you didn't have the high strikeout rates with guys like Nick Castellanos in the lineup already. But because they're there, it compounds things. And you kind of got to complement the team based on your top dollar guys. It's one thing if Nick Castellanos was an ultimate contact hitter and didn't strike out a ton, but that's just not the reality. You can't ask Nick Castellanos to not be Nick Castellanos. In that same regard, you can't ask Brandon Marsh to not be Brandon Marsh. But they kind of don't connect in that way if you're having each of these guys in the order. There are times where it feels like this lineup just has nothing, man. That it is just strikeout after strikeout. It makes life look way too easy for the opposing pitching staff, and that is a reflection on the entire team as a whole. Now, the other part that I did want to point out, I do think a lot of people have written off Johan Rojas. That I understand he's never going to be, a power hitting threat in center field, to put it lightly, but I do think he deserves a lot of credit for the way that he has been hitting the ball this season. And to point out his stats, in particular, Rojas, still no home runs, but 6 RBIs, a 348 on-base percentage. He's had 43 at-bats, 13 hits in those. He has had 14 strikeouts, a slugging percentage of 349. Still 24 years old, still got some things to improve, no doubt. The bunting, it does drive me crazy that he has not turned himself into a high-level bunter yet. But, dude, speed does not lie, and there have been him beating out some opportunities. There was one where he was trying to bunt, went basically right back to the pitcher. The pitcher turned, went to throw out the runner at second to try and turn 2. And by the time did not have a play at second, turned to throw it back to first, Johan Rojas had already beat it out. It is that level of speed that can be a difference maker, and I do think that is important there. So, I mean, we will see if this is here to stay. I think it is fair to assess that it's likely there will be a cold spell coming at some point because Rojas has been on relatively a tear in recent games, and by a tear for him, I mean hitting singles at a fairly high rate and, putting them through the gaps in the infield. It's not like this dude is ripping power, ripping liners or anything like that, but I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing by Johan Rojas at the plate, and I do hope this trend continues. If that is the case, I don't know exactly what that means for Brandon Marsh. Ultimately, when I get back to all these conversations, I do kind of think the Phillies are sorting through a bunch of options with none of them not quite being good enough. But I think Brandon Marsh's strikeout rate and the overall struggles to start the season may be enough to close the door on his future with the Phillies. We will see how that ultimately shakes out to this point. Do wish the best for him. He seems to be playing well down in the minors right now and bringing the vibes as usual. I've seen some pretty cool clips of him and Garrett Stubbs getting fired up in the dugout and that kind of thing. So do hope they're enjoying their time there. Wishing the best for Marsh, and I hope he turns it around. I hope he proves me wrong and he gets another chance to make the absolute most of it. But it has not been the start to the season that I think we hope whatsoever, and we will see how things go from there. Appreciate you guys for continuing to rock with us here on Phillies Digest. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video and any comments you have below. Talk to me about your outlook on Brandon Marsh specifically. Drop those thoughts in the comments. We'll be back talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.